Look what happened. Is this crazy? We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of Make America Great Again. How can you be against it?
Welcome to a special year-end episode of Sidebar from the Washington Post. We are so glad you've joined us this year and today, and we hope you're having a great holiday. I'm Libby Casey, and I'm with my colleagues Rhonda Colvin and James Homan. And today we're doing something a little bit different. We're looking back on the biggest moments of 2024. What got us here? What was pivotal in shaping our political reality as we are weeks away from a second Trump term? Democrats are regrouping, and there are huge looming changes coming to American policy and politics. So we've come to the table with our biggest moments in mind. We'll do a round, then we'll do another round. No rounds of eggnog, just rounds of biggest moments, and we'll see where things take us. We also have some surprises for each other. So let's start out with what was truly the biggest moment of the year. Rhonda, what topped it all off for you?
Well, I think for me, the assassination attempt, the first assassination attempt in July, where Donald Trump was shot at a Pennsylvania rally. There was also a member of the crowd who passed away. I say that it was one of the big moments because, yes, it changed the mood. If you remember, we were all in Milwaukee for the RNC or on the way to Milwaukee.
I was on the plane.
And I was in my hotel lobby, and you could tell that it changed the mood. But I also say that it had an effect on the campaign where it became a campaign rallying cry. I remember being on the campaign trail, seeing ads where it would be a Trump ad and you would see the clip of him putting his fist up and with the blood coming down his face. And that would be the last clip on the ad. I also saw it as yard signs, too, in some neighborhoods. So I think it became sort of a big moment for Republicans where they were able to use it I guess I would hate to call it useful for their advantage, but apparently it was because it definitely changed the temperature of the race and gave them a rallying cry.
It made Trump too. I mean, there was as you recall, I mean, it was right on the eve of the convention, as you said, and there was this kind of has Trump changed, that there was an indication that it had sort of like this near-death experience had kind of changed his outlook. And I think that there actually is still some evidence that it had a real effect. Obviously, he comes in that Thursday night at the Republican convention in Milwaukee and gives a long stem winder and goes off script and it went back. He's still fundamentally who he is. But I do think a lot of people really appreciated the fighting spirit. That picture where he says, fight, fight, fight. There were people, I think, who kind of had some newfound respect for him.
You have like a major labor leader who usually goes to Democratic conventions, speaking to the Republican convention and saying, like, no matter what, he's one tough
SOB.
And so that there you go. So there was the sort of shock and horror of the assassination attempt. And then there was the political reality of it. I remember first seeing one of those T-shirts out in the wild, right, where I saw someone with the T-shirt or the T-shirt being sold of Trump, holding up the fist in the air. And when I talked to Republicans at the convention that week, they felt like he'd been like touched by God. So it sort of hardened their resolve, but also I think tied into that machismo vibe that Trump was really going for, and then tried to capitalize on that lasted throughout the campaign. So let's talk about another huge moment of the year, James.
That debate a few weeks before the shooting, though, June 27th, CNN, one-on-one, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump matchup. Joe Biden would have been the Democratic nominee had it not been for that debate.
Which he and his team had pushed for.
Right. They wanted an early debate. They wanted to put to bed doubts that he was up for it, and instead they inflamed them, and it caused really a month-long panic among Democrats. And it was a remarkable thing to watch. Nancy Pelosi, who no longer has an official title except Congresswoman, Speaker Emerita, maneuver behind the scenes and essentially push the sitting president aside in favor of Kamala Harris.
Let's play some tape from that debate.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Fateful June debate between Donald Trump and President Joe Biden.
The White House had said adamantly that Biden was fine. They were saying stuff. There were Biden campaign surrogates on TV saying he's sharper than he's ever been. Adrienne Elrod, a spokeswoman for the Biden campaign, said that a week before the debate, that he is sharp as a tack, that videos of him appearing to be confused were cheap fakes. And they had really insulated him so that when a lot of Americans saw this debate, it was especially Democrats and donors, members of Congress who hadn't really interacted with him because his frailty had been concealed. It was incredibly eye-opening, and they realized, even going into that debate, Biden was trailing Trump in the polls. And so one of the reasons they wanted the early debate was to change the trajectory of the race. And there was this recognition correctly that Joe Biden was not going to beat Donald Trump, and that if Democrats wanted to beat Trump, they had to try something different. It didn't guarantee it would work. Obviously, it ended up not working. But there's no doubt that Kamala Harris lost by less than Biden would have, and also Democrats would have lost a lot more Senate seats and House seats if Biden had been at the top of the ticket.
Rhonda, did you know in that moment as the debate was unfolding that night, this is a pivotal moment of the year?
You were there.
Yeah, I was there. And I do remember thinking, and just being among other members of the press, just watching it, and everyone just being very still, like, this is not going anywhere great for Democrats. I think that was incredibly clear, because I remember, and even if you go back and watch our show that night, I remember the energy in that arena where the media was, and just how, and even around Atlanta where it was happening, people were like, yeah, I'm getting home now to go watch it. Everyone was really excited about this. But then after it ended, there was no mistaking that it had really packed a punch. And I think everybody from the Democratic surrogates who came in, not many came in.
I remember that. I remember you standing there, and the Republicans all swarmed in.
They
were excited.
They were thrilled. And Democrats were saying, well, every now and then people have bad debates, or, they struggle with some things. And he has a taxing job, of course, as the current president. And they were already getting the messaging going. And but it was just so dramatically different to just hours before that.
I'm going to throw in another big moment of the year, which was that quick coalescence behind Kamala Harris to become the Democratic nominee. In retrospect, it seems like it was a done deal, but it wasn't at the time. We didn't know what would happen when Joe Biden read the writing on the wall and chose to step aside as the Democratic Party's nominee. It happened so quickly. The Democrats came behind her. They rallied behind her. And she, by the end of the campaign, had really found her voice as a leader of the party. And had things gone differently, obviously, we would all be remembering that in a very different context. But I still think that is a huge moment of the year.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it changed everything, really. I think it also helped solidify things for her in whatever career she chooses from here on out. She had so much support. Within days of becoming the nominee, she was able to have more fundraisers and more donor money and volunteers who signed up to work on her campaign. So it showed she was able to energize. So yeah, certainly a big point. And I just remember the uncertainty that we all felt from coming back from the RNC, not knowing who the Democrat would be, or if Joe Biden would stay in the game. And having, it was a Sunday, remember? We get that, I think it was a tweet, right? Or an X post from Biden saying that he is choosing to step out and would let everyone know more later.
Yeah, and there was this awkward 30-minute period where he announced he was
He dropped the bomb, but he didn't have a
bomb.
plan. Yeah.
And then 30 minutes later, he tweeted, "I'm supporting Kamala Harris." And so there was this: is there going to be this open fight for the nomination, and who might challenge Harris? And
Our delegates going to have arguments on the floor,
right?
And
it could have gone to the floor of the Democratic
Right.
convention, and it really, And then that afternoon, Kamala Harris is sitting in the dining room at the Naval Observatory, just like working the phone, like really like burning it up. And by the end of that day, had essentially locked down the nomination, and everyone who might have challenged her stepped back. It was one of the wildest days we've covered in politics.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some runners-up. Runners-up.
Runners up.
Thank you. Attorneys General. Yes. Let's talk about some runners-up. Really huge moments and pivotal, but in a year of huge moments, like somehow these are second tier. Rhonda, let's talk law.
Well, we had the conviction of Donald Trump in the New York case, in the hush money case. Huge deal. I think now, from the perspective where we are at in this week in December, I'm not sure what it meant for his election, but at the time, it of course made history. No other sitting president or former president had ever been convicted of a crime. I think where we did see some impact is when he was going through the whole trial, and also the other indictments that came down from the other cases. You can look at FEC data and see that he did have upticks in fundraising money coming in when his supporters felt that he was under siege. So that was something that was feared by Democrats as well as the people putting together the cases is, will we just energize his base if we go after him? And I think in some ways they might have. But of course, everyone says no one is above the law, and they went forward with that case and it ended in a conviction. But it was a big moment to be there on the sidewalk when the jury came back with a verdict pretty quickly, actually. But of course, it was New York City and things happened quickly there.
I mean, when Donald Trump was indicted, now we're talking about a full year earlier, like March of 2023, that was a game changer. It made him newly relevant, and it outraged so many supporters that the fundraising dollars poured in. And I guess the question is, did that after effect still linger into 2024?
I think it absolutely did. Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, has told people that he feels like he lost the GOP nomination the day that Alvin Bragg indicted Trump, because it led to this rally around the flag effect where Republicans wanted to come to Trump's defense. And that was counterintuitive. That certainly wasn't the conventional wisdom of what was going to happen. And, a lot of people thought Trump being off the campaign trail for a long time in 2024, Trump, all these reminders of his assignation with Stormy Daniels, all of that would kind of be this baggage that weighed him down. And Trump really is this Teflon figure in our politics where stuff just seems to kind of like skim off of him that would destroy most conventional politicians. A sex scandal, paying hush money,
all back to back.
Getting convicted of a felony, and it redounded to Donald Trump's advantage.
I'm going to throw in one that might surprise you both. And this is the role that RFK played in the campaign, specifically choosing to step aside from the presidential race. I don't think entering the presidential race was pivotal, but stepping aside may have been. And here is my evidence. So, Donald Trump, Time Magazine's Person of the Year for the second time. The profile piece in Time is really interesting and goes into some of the decision-making of the campaign that got Donald Trump to win the presidency. Susie Wiles, obviously a key person, cites RFK dropping out and supporting Trump as a pivotal moment. Let me read this to you. The endorsement by RFK was one of the campaign's key moments. It neutralized the threat that Kennedy would peel off votes from Trump, but more importantly, quote, he allowed us to broaden the base of the party, she says. He was a key way to do that. And I just remember talking to people who surprised me in coming on board with Donald Trump because they liked some of RFK's suspicion of the government, outside stands, sort of crunchy granola perspective. I would not have thought he would have been pivotal when he entered the race and was just still on the ballot, but Susie Wiles, who comes from a really important perspective, thinks it was important.
He definitely could have been a spoiler. I do. You think about ultimately the popular vote margin is 1.5 points, and if I went and watched RFK campaign for Trump in Michigan, and he had a huge crowd, and it was people who, most of them, not all of them, most of them wouldn't go to a Trump rally normally, and he had a following, and he was saying vote for Donald Trump and his Make America Healthy Again message. I think it did broaden the base, and it also removed what could have diverted 2 or 3%. And ultimately what was a decisive one, but a close election.
When you were reading the words of the incoming chief of staff, Susie Wiles, I was thinking about my reporting in the earlier part of the year with the Deciders Project here at the Post, where we were able to poll people who were in decisive states and also didn't have much of a voting record or really showed any enthusiasm for voting to see where they might land. I remember there were lists of people in these states who said that they were okay with reporters contacting them ongoing through the campaign to check in and see how they're feeling. And I remember seeing a lot of them say in the poll that they supported RFK Jr. And it kind of shocked me to look at people in decisive states say that. And I tried to find commonalities. One of the commonalities I found, a lot of them were women and young women in their 20s. So I'm not surprised by what Wiles is saying. I do think, I don't know if he made or broke anything, RFK Jr., but I do think it helped in ways that were really crucial.
Yeah. Two other key moments that Susie Wiles talks about in this Time magazine piece were when Donald Trump shifted his position on abortion and said it should be left up to the states. And another one was finally encouraging Republicans to vote by mail and do early voting. And what's so interesting is that there were people telling him, like, you've got to be supportive of this. We need those votes. But according to the Time piece, it says, it took a visit from Rob Gleason, a former chair of the Pennsylvania Republican Party, to frame the matter in terms that made Trump agree. Sir, your people are so excited to vote for you, they want to as soon as they can. And that is the way to get to Donald Trump, right? That is the framing that it took. And so he stood down on his antagonism towards early and mail voting.
That really was huge. I'm glad you picked that out. And I read the Time piece. I agree. It's really good because it does offer a window and the whole campaign. And those little things really do end up making the difference.
I want to run this one by you. What are the coulda, shoulda, woulda moments? What are the moments that, had the campaign gone differently and Kamala Harris won, perhaps Democrats won the House or the Senate, how would we be talking differently about this incredibly historic year? James?
We would be probably talking about the Madison Square Garden rally the weekend before that was, where the Puerto
Right before
Rican
the election,
garbage comment,
yeah.
right before the election.
This is Donald Trump at Madison Square Garden.
And a litany of people saying kind of wacky things and it sort of being kind of off.
I'm going to say wacky equaled. They were allegedly, jokes, but racist, sexist, so America firsty that they were nationalistic and really a dramatic departure from how Republicans have typically talked about sort of American values.
And when the election's so close, right, it's 1.5 points. I think if Trump had lost, the narrative would have been like, this is not who we are, and Americans rejected this. And obviously it's a basically evenly divided country, and it turns out a lot of voters are quite comfortable with those offensive remarks.
Rhonda?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking of is the VP debate and how that felt like pretty much a wash, that, neither candidate really showed any, no one really got ahead in that one. And I wonder if Governor Walz would have maybe had an even better performance. Maybe that would have given Harris a little bit of a boost in October when it really mattered. So maybe we would be talking about how well he did and how he was someone who helped her gain even more support. But I've been thinking a lot about the VP debate just being just something that, people saw and totally forgot about, but it could have been a game changer or at least a little boost in such a tight race.
One of the other names floated for VP was Josh Shapiro. And the reporting was, James, that you and others shared with us, was that he could have been really like a competitor kind of nipping at Kamala Harris's heels, and she felt like she could have a good working relationship with Tim Walz. But there's campaigning and there's governing. And so do you look back and think of that as a pivotal decision?
If the election had come down to Pennsylvania, then it would have been, the fact that Trump won all 7 swing states makes it hard to say, wow, Kamala Harris really screwed up by not picking the popular governor of Pennsylvania. You could see a scenario where if it had come down to the Keystone State and she narrowly lost it, it would be like, wow, if she had chosen Shapiro, she might be president. But I think it's harder just the way that everything sort of broke Trump's
Another
way.
coulda, shoulda, woulda is Springfield, Ohio, and they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. J.D. Vance floated this bogus theory that Haitian immigrants there were eating people's pets. Donald Trump amplified it, hugely amplified it by saying it on the debate stage with Kamala Harris looking on with sort of a quizzical look on her face. Could this kind of rhetoric have derailed Trump's campaign?
So, I mean, we talked about this on Sidebar at the time, and I was I think I was a little nuanced, but I think the conventional wisdom appropriately was like, wow, this shows Trump's kind of off the rails again. I think what ended up happening in practice, and I should say, Trump people privately told me, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. This is really bad. I can't believe this. This is obviously ridiculous. But what it did was change the conversation coming out of that one debate between Harris and Trump to immigration. And even though Trump was lying, immigration was a winning issue for him. And Kamala Harris was, for the days after this debate, where she did pretty well, talking about immigration. And it is one of those things where, in retrospect, that it might have actually, like, as crazy as this seems, been, again, redounded to Trump's advantage. But if this is another, to your point, the coulda, woulda, shoulda, if Harris had won, we'd be sitting here right now saying, wow, that was a turning point because it showed Trump was off the rails.
Yeah. On election night, when the results from Ohio came in, I checked the county results in Clark County, where Springfield is located, and they went for Trump in about the same margins, maybe even a little higher than in the past races. So I was really interested to see if it made a dent there, given that these people had, extra law enforcement that had to be in the town because they had, bomb threats and schools were shut down. I mean, it was really a major story. But seeing there that they, approved Trump's messaging on this, it kind of shows you where we're at.
Can I say one that I just thought of, a dog that didn't bark? When we're talking about, as we're talking, I think I gave a speech in Minnesota in June, and I said this is going to be the AI election, the election of deep fakes. And obviously there was misinformation, there were lies, there was stuff that went viral that was BS. But it is sort of amazing that the election didn't really come down to like a deep fake video in the final days of the campaign. Yeah. Foreign interference, while there was efforts by foreign governments to push different messages, and it wasn't a big issue at the end of the day. And sometimes you look back to what we were really worried about a year ago, and it didn't really kind of end up being the big October surprise that we thought it might become.
Yeah.
Rhonda, James, happy holidays. Thank you so much for all that you've done in 2024. And it's been my privilege to be along for the ride with you both, as well as everybody else here in the newsroom of the Washington Post. So thank you to you. Thanks to our listeners and our viewers. A reminder, you can hear us every Thursday on your favorite podcast app or find us on YouTube. Just look for the Washington Post. We'll be back next week as the new Congress begins. Believe it or not, they are ready to start up. And even though Donald Trump will be sworn in until January 20th, the new Congress kicks off in early January. So we'll be here to talk about all that is to come. See you next week.